Welcome in all of you who believe there is no such thing as a football offseason. Welcome into the No Offseason Pod. I'm your host, Anaya, and welcome in for a bonus pod for my remaining top running backs after RB5. Now, I will say in full disclosure, I have, roughly some rankings for these guys I'm about to discuss today, but there's really no particular order in which I like. I'm just here to discuss the film breakdown. So that's what we're going to talk about. So today, we're getting in to talk about some sleeper running backs who I think have a really good chance to be drafted on day 2, day 3, most certainly not the first night of the NFL draft. In fact, if I'm being honest, maybe one of them is drafted on the first night of the NFL draft. Everyone else in this class, no matter how much I love them and no matter how much I talk about the value that they can bring to an NFL team, the reality is some teams are just starting to pick up on the value and how much they need to invest in terms of draft capital toward this position. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and get started. I want to talk about a player that I've charted multiple times as I work at PFF as a player participation data analyst or data collectionist, rather, and that's Tyler Allgeier, the running back out of BYU. So I have a lot of experience watching him. As I was charting, I was extremely excited to watch him play. He was just very dominant in a physical way. And that's going to be his role. That has not changed. His frame and his weight hasn't necessarily changed. He's a big back. To me, his comparison is Eddie Lacy's frame. So he's a pretty big dude, but his play style is much more akin to that of Zach Moss. So he does have some vision. He has not very to little acceleration like most of the big backs in this class. But does once he gets to that 4.6 40 speed, he can be pretty hard to take down, right? You don't want anyone who's 220 pounds plus coming at you at a 4.6 40 speed, but he doesn't really hit the straightaway or have that much green space in front of him just because he's not really a burner, doesn't get into open space. BYU didn't really ask him to be used in the passing game a whole lot. So it is what it is in terms of his role. And I don't think that role will change at the next level if given the chance. He has hands, but again, that's not how he was used. I wouldn't be surprised if an NFL team took a chance on him to allow him to see if he's able to be used as a pass catcher. But to me, with the abundance of scat backs and pass catching backs, there's really no reason to try to invest time into making these, physical backs into pass catchers and to play on third down. His signature move is definitely a one-cut juke. Doesn't really make people miss as often as you'd like him to, and he certainly loses his speed when he makes those cuts and jukes, much like Brian Robinson Jr. or RB3 here. I think his role is very much set in stone as a goal line back for Tyler Allgeier, and that's concerning at a fantasy level. I think in terms of normal NFL analysis, Tyler Allgeier is a great early down back to have, and the best part is you don't have to spend a second-round pick like you would have to on Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker, etc. Another main concern for Tyler Allgeier, besides not being able to be utilized in pass-catching roles or as a pass protector all that reliably, is he did have 4 fumbles in 2021, which was tied for the 4th most amongst all running backs in the nation. So not really sure why that is, but his hand size is not too horrible. It's around 9 inches, 9.25 of an inch. So not sure what that issue is there, but nonetheless, the data says he does have 4 fumbles in 1 year, and that's just way more than you'd like to see. Anything more than 2 fumbles in one season is, especially at the collegiate level, is definitely concerning. So again, going back to Tyler Allgeier, that Eddie Lacy frame, but he plays a whole lot more like Zach Moss. My next running back that I want to talk about is someone I'm extremely excited about. Because I think that this player can be utilized in one way. Like, he has one set role, and I don't see him being used in any other way just because of his size, and that's James Cook. Yes, the brother of Dalvin Cook, the Minnesota Vikings franchise running back at this time. James Cook is certainly not like his brother at all, except in the pass-catching role. James Cook is your absolute best scat back in this class, at least to me. If I had to pick one scat back that I'm taking, if I need someone to be able to be utilized as an extra pair of hands for my quarterback, I'm taking James Cook. You know, in the probably in the 5th round is where he's going to end up landing. I don't think he falls that far into the 7th or anything of that nature, but he is a speedy, shifty little guy. 5'11", 190 is his frame. With that frame, the player comparison in terms of physicality is Felix Jones, but his play style is way more like Theo Riddick. And I don't think that's a bad thing. If you're looking at this in terms of a fantasy perspective, Theo Riddick was heavily used in the PPR. Heavily used in the passing game. So, and that's something that I could see James Cook doing. He was successful at it at Georgia, obviously won a championship. So the guy's a winner. He has excellent hands, excellent catch radius for a running back, and he's extremely slippery and hard to touch. He's not physical, so he only made a total of 25 missed tackles in 2021. So again, if he's going to make you miss, it's most likely going to be before you get a hand on him. Looking at his tape, anytime that someone was approaching him, pretty much had his legs, he's going down. He's not going to be able to fight for extra yards. But I really want to touch on how efficient and explosive he is in the receiving game. 8.6 yards after the catch per attempt. So every time he caught the ball, he was averaging almost 9 yards after that catch. So that's something you got to really love, the fact that he is so slippery and able to fight for more yards after the catch. But again, if someone can get a hand on him, he's going down. It's just that simple. And it makes sense. When you're 190 pounds and you're going up against the SEC, it's going to be hard to fight for those extra yards. Now, imagine the defenses at the NFL level. Everyone is basically as good, even better than SEC defenders. So I'd like to see how that works out for him. I definitely think he's going to have a role on 3rd down. So I'm excited to see him play. I really am. This is one of my favorite running backs to watch, and I'm excited to see him play on Sundays. Another way that he'll see the field is as a special teams player. I don't have any data as far as if he was a kick returner at Georgia. So if anyone wants to help me out there, I'll certainly find it for you all and post it in the Patreon. But I could see him being used as a kick returner, as a punt returner. Very quick, very elusive. And he had 5 explosive receptions. So for those of you who have listened to the rookie running back evaluation pod, I told you that explosive runs were that of which were rush attempts of 10 or more yards. Well, in the passing game, it's 15 or more yards. So he had 5 explosive receptions of 15 yards or more. So you love to see that. He's able to stretch the field for you. He's definitely someone that the NFL linebackers have to account for. They can't just let him slip because he's definitely he can take it to the house. So James Cook, one of my favorites, my favorite scat back in the entire class. And let's segue into our next physical running back, and that is Dameon Pierce out of Florida. So we have our first Gator on the board. He is an NFL ready frame. He is 5'10, low center of gravity, 205 pounds. And he can play, it looks like, up to 215 pounds as well. The first thing that popped out to me as far as watching Dameon Pierce's film, playing against the SEC, is he's just physical. When he runs with a really strong stiff arm. He's able to push people out of the way. His vision might be the best in the entire class. So, I have him outside the top 5, and that's for some reasons I'll get into in a moment. And he can definitely block. So I think that's going to be his role. He wasn't really used much in the passing game, but that's neither here nor there. I don't think that's his role. To me, he can catch some passes. His route running it's okay. It's not something to fall in love with, but he can definitely pass block for you, and he's got good vision to run. Now, I have some concern as far as total touches or a total amount of usage at Florida. He never had more than like 105 or 107 rush attempts. So Florida wasn't really asking Dameon Pierce to do a whole lot. So his productivity is really not there. The yardage isn't there. So to me, this is kind of like one of those Antonio Gibson situations. He's not the player comp, by the way, by any means. But in terms of how much he was used at the collegiate level, it can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. For some running backs, if they don't have the productivity or the usage there, it typically doesn't pan out for them at the next level. But I will say Antonio Gibson, the running back in Washington, it has, made a career so far, and he really didn't have that many touches at the collegiate level either. So I'm not saying Dameon Pierce is not going to have a career because of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if, he's out of the league in 3 years. So contact balance is nice. So whenever he does get the ball and someone is getting ready to tackle him, he is able to stay pretty bouncy for someone of his size at 215 pounds. So again, only 102 rush attempts in 2021. Not saying he can't handle a full workload, but we just haven't seen it yet. So, this is someone you could stash away if you're looking at this in fantasy, and then just hope that, he falls somewhere where he can land a big role, because he can be an early down player. He can catch out of the backfield. He's extremely versatile. One of those players that's, a jack of all trades, kind of like Brian Robinson Jr., where you're good at everything, but you're not amazing at anything. So that's my verdict on Dameon Pierce. My player comparison for him in terms of frame, size, physicality, and play style is Spencer Ware, the former Abilene Christian University running back, used to play for the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's my comparison for him. And let's mark our way into Rachaad White. I believe I'm much lower on Rachaad White than the rest of, the industry or analysts, whoever you may listen to. And that's perfectly fine. I get it. He was used so heavily in the passing game. This is another one of those running backs who most likely isn't going to establish himself as an early down player because Arizona State didn't really ask him to do that. But man, did they use him as a pass catcher out of the backfield. And he has the same frame as Breece Hall. So he's not entirely small. This is, a 6 foot, 5'11" guy, just over 200 pounds. And so he had 43 receptions in 2021. That's a big deal. That's how many, catches that some wide receivers get, depending on how many targets they receive. But out of the backfield, 43 catches, that's definitely something that you ought to check off your list. This is definitely someone you want to stash if you're playing fantasy football in a PPR league. If it's not PPR, I pretty much want no part of him. But stylistically, he kind of plays like Kenyon Drake. He's not the same size. He's closer in size to Travis Homer, but he plays a little bit similar to Kenyon Drake, the running back in Oakland, I believe, at this time, used to play in Arizona. He's extremely elusive and quick as well. So, and that's what you like to see. You don't want someone who's good at catching the ball and then, stiff as a rock, can't lose anybody. So, the acceleration and the speed certainly showed up on tape. Speaking of speed, he ran a 4.48 at the NFL Combine. So, another concern that I have for Rachaad White, besides not being used in the early down role, is kind of like Kenneth Walker. He only had one real year of productivity as a player in general, and that was this last year in 2021. Sometimes you'd like to see a little bit more consistency. Why wasn't he used in the previous years while he was there? I'm not saying he wasn't used at all, but we didn't really see that massive jump in usage and in production until last year. So take that with what you will. He's going to most likely convert into your scat back. I can see Rachaad White actually, converting into a wide receiver full time. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is an NFL team, running back coach, or a wide receiver coach at the next level who says, hey, Rachaad, we should probably just have you switch full time to wide receiver, because he has the route running ability. He has the speed. He has the elusiveness. You might just want to use him as a pass catcher and just forego the whole pass blocking, early down, ball carrier role. To me, that's going to be the best thing for Rachaad White at the next level. My player comparison for Rachaad White is Kenneth Dixon, a.k.a. Booby Dixon. Used to play for the Baltimore Ravens, and he kind of had that role where he was mostly a pass catcher, sometimes used as a pass blocker. He was fine. He had some good runs every now and then, and I expect that of Rachaad White too. I just think it would be better for him to be a full-time pass catcher. Moving on to our next running back. Looks like we're in our last three. And I've got Jaylen Warren on our radar here from Oklahoma State. One of the first things that I watched was his game against Baylor. Baylor obviously had one of the better defenses in the Big 12 this past season. So, he struggled. But my biggest concern is his vision and his size. I have Jaylen Warren here as 5'8", 205. So, again, low center of gravity, kind of has that Devin Singletary type build. He can definitely catch out of the backfield, and he has some speed. He did run at the combine, finished with a 4.55. So he's not blazing speed, but he's also not completely slow. So that's around the same speed as Tyler Allgeier and Kyren Williams. And, of course, there was some chatter about the turf at Lucas Oil Field in Indianapolis for the NFL Combine, saying that it was making players a little bit faster. They were having issues with time. I wouldn't be surprised if the time for him was wrong. 4.55, I just didn't see that on tape. We never got to see Jaylen Warren really bust out that kind of speed, so I don't buy it. I think he's a little slower than that. He probably runs about a 4.65 instead, 4.6. But he can be explosive because he has acceleration. He just doesn't have that top speed. But he does seem to accelerate really well. This is someone you want to put into space, so maybe using as a, screens, pitches, tosses, and then, have the offensive line pull and block for him at the second level. He's not going to beat defenders with his physicality, just due to his frame. But he can run, and he's got decent route running too at Oklahoma State. We've seen previous pass catching backs come out of Oklahoma State and do decently well This player comparison for him seems a little lazy because they came out of the same school. But I've got Justice Hill as a player comparison for Jaylen Warren. And I think that just makes sense. Oklahoma State, that's just how they use their running backs. And they end up being pretty efficient and pretty productive. So that is the verdict for Jaylen Warren, the Oklahoma State running back. Moving on to an FCS school. This guy has been getting a whole lot more buzz recently on Twitter and on various websites. And he has an interesting frame as well, 5'11", 207. And that is Pierre Strong Jr. out of South Dakota State University. So, if you had to describe this guy in one word, he is just like his mascot at South Dakota State. He's a jackrabbit. He has some strength to him, but this guy is blazing fast. He ran the fastest 40 at the NFL Combine last month in March, and he finished with a 4.37. Again, that's the fastest among all running backs. Not the fastest in general, but the fastest out of all running backs, a 4.37 40. And it definitely popped up on film. He was not one of those players where the testing or the measurements didn't match the tape. No, Pierre Strong looks fast as hell on tape. I advise you to go watch his game against North Dakota State, where you can watch him and Christian Watson duke it out as just offensive weapons. It was like a track meet. Another thing that was really cool to watch during that game is Pierre Strong was used in the Wildcat. So they believed in him as a ball carrier to be able to make the decision of, keeping or handing off. And they used the Wildcat not just at the goal line, but they also used it in between the 20s. So it was nice to see him get the ball in open space, and South Dakota State realized that, and they were just going to get him to be able to make a play in whichever way that he possibly could, as long as he had the ball in his hands. So, and I think that's smart. I think that you can get this guy on day 3, probably round 6, and just feed him the ball. Use him as a gadget player. Use him on special teams to return punts. You don't find 4.3 40 speed all the time at running back. And also to be able to have some physicality to his game too. His vision is definitely not where I'd like it to be. It's certainly not NFL ready, just based on where he's looking in terms of as the play is unfolding in front of him and his offensive line. He just seems like he's going to go into the hole that he's designed to go to no matter what. Sometimes runs into the back of his own offensive lineman. And it happens, right? When you're that fast, it almost looks like sometimes he's too fast for his own good. He kind of loses his legs underneath him. But nonetheless, you got to be able to use that speed. And I think that's going to be, obviously his best attribute at the next level. He has decent hands. He's able to catch with his hands. As y'all know, catching with your chest is like one of my biggest pet peeves. It doesn't make you any better of a receiver. And we didn't see that out of him. So Pierre Strong can, he can be serviceable as an early down back and also as a pass catcher. Didn't really see any pass protection stand out to me. Sure, he can do it. He can get in front of a defender, but he's also 5'11". And so if a large edge rusher is approaching the backfield and they can read the quarterback's eyes, they're going to look right over the 5'11" Pierre Strong and just swat that ball down. So he's not the worst at pass protection, but I don't think that's how he'll be used. One of my biggest concerns, and it's not always the running back's fault. It could be on a handoff. I didn't see every single one of the fumbles, but Pierre Strong had 4 fumbles in 2021, and that's a little concerning. His hands aren't that small. 9.25 inch hands. is his size. I don't know. I'm not really sure why it is, but he did have 4 fumbles, and that, like earlier in one of the other, players having that many fumbles, Tyler Allgeier, they were both tied for 4th. I can see why that's why he's going to be drafted late, and you just got to be able to take care of the ball. You can't score if you are constantly turning the ball over. That goes for quarterbacks. That goes for anyone who's touching the ball, right? So I can see that as a liability and a deal breaker for some teams. But, maybe he just needs to be trained on a little bit more of how to carry the ball with those size of hands and his frame. So for him, it really only takes one cut, and it turns into an absolute track meet for Pierre Strong. So I'm excited to watch him play. He's just really fast. Not as good of a pass catcher as James Cook, but, out of all the running backs that you've heard me talk about in the past few days, he's the fastest. And, the 40 time showed it. The tape shows it. So whichever NFL team gets him, they just need to give him the damn ball. It's that simple. He has the frame of Darrington Evans. So that's going to be my player comp for him is Darrington Evans. And I don't know what to make of that. I feel like their career outlooks could be pretty similar. They're small running backs, mostly going to be used in, the passing game, 3rd and long, those kinds of situations. And we'll see. I think Pierre Strong has a chance to be this year's Elijah Mitchell if he lands in the right spot where the starter in front of him gets hurt, and then he's able to show off his speed, able to show off, why he was productive at South Dakota State. And a similar parallel there is Elijah Mitchell, as we all know, landed in San Francisco last year, but he also had the fastest 40 time out of all the running backs last year. So, of course, that's just a correlation, but it'd be interesting to see Pierre Strong land somewhere where he's able to possibly squeak out a 3-down roll. Last running back I'm going to talk about today is Abram Smith. And I am going to give him a ranking. He is my RB7 out of this entire class. Has a frame of 5'11", 220 pounds. Weirdly enough, that he's that big. And his hand size is only 8 1/4 of an inch. So for those of you who were keeping up with the NFL news, that is 1/4 of an inch smaller than Kenny Pickett's hands. And I measured my hands for reference, and Abram Smith has the same size hands that I do, 8 1/4 inch. Okay. I don't think I could be able to take some hits that Abram Smith has taken. He was an absolute bruiser of a back at Baylor. And that's how he'll be used in the NFL as well. But I found a lot more than just that on the tape. He also ran at his pro day just last week at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, and he finished with a 4.50 40-meter dash. So that's faster than Brian Robinson. That's faster than Kyren Williams. So he's not slow. This is a physical runner who has some breakaway speed. So Abram Smith, to me, is going to be sneakily one of the better underrated running backs going into this class. And so I'm excited to see what he does at the next level. Much like other players or running backs at this size of 220 pounds, he just doesn't have the acceleration. But once he gets to that top speed, he's gone. He is absolutely gone. He had 46 explosive runs in 2021, 50 total missed forced tackles. So this is an elusive physical player, surprisingly good ball carrier vision behind the line of scrimmage. He is able to juke and move side to side. So, if there weren't so many versatile backs in this class. I would be very tempted to put Abram Smith over Kyren Williams, but to me right now, Kyren just had the better film. To me, he's just way more useful in the pass protection game. Abram Smith's pass pro is just not there yet. But if a team notices how they can utilize Abram Smith to his max potential and give him a 3-down role, clean up his pass protection, this is a guy who could sneakily end up being a 3-down back at the NFL level. So, again, let's talk about some of the guys, just give you a summary of all the ones we talked about. Tyler Allgeier out of BYU, kind of has an Eddie Lacy type frame, but a Zach Moss style play. Ran a 4.6 40. Vision's kind of lacking. His role is going to be a goal line back. To me, I just don't think that's changing for him. James Cook, my favorite scat back, the best hands out of the entire class. He's got the Felix Jones type body and a Theo Riddick type play style. He also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but he had a 10-foot and 4-inch broad jump, which is usually a pretty good indicator of athleticism in the running back position. So, again, James Cook is just your elusive pass catcher out of the backfield. That role's not changing, and I think he's going to be able to be PPR gold for you fantasy players out there. Dameon Pierce, the running back out of Florida, his player comparison is Spencer Ware. Major role for Dameon Pierce is going to be a pass protector. Remember, this is the player who didn't really get all that many touches at Florida, so we're kind of on that Antonio Gibson situation. Is he doesn't have a whole lot of tread on his tires, but is that good or is that a bad thing in terms of maybe he's not ready for a workload at the NFL level? That is to be determined at the NFL. Jaylen Warren, the Oklahoma State running back, his player comp was Justice Hill. Vision just is not there as a ball carrier. He's 5'8", 205, ran a 4.55 40 at the combine. He's only explosive if he gets into open space. And again, just going back to the vision, he just doesn't do enough for me at that frame. Not the best pass catcher, not the best hands. He's a liability as a pass protector. So to me, just not someone I'm really, really worried about. If he proves me wrong and has a great NFL career, then more power to him, right? I'm just going off base what I can see on the film. Pierre Strong could be this year's Elijah Mitchell. His player comparison is Darrington Evans, 5'11", 207, ran the fastest 40 at the combine, where he finished with a 4.37 40. He was utilized in so many ways in South Dakota State, right? Don't forget, they used him as a wildcat back in the goal line position, goal line situations as well. So, Pierre Strong and Abram Smith are those sneaky guys who could end up stealing a 3-down role at the next level. Speaking of Abram Smith, my RB7 out of Baylor University, his player comparison is Devontae Booker. This is an extremely physical guy who is also explosive at the same time. 5'11", 220 pounds, ran a 4.5 40 at Baylor's Pro Day last week. But he does have a weird hand size, right? 8 inches and 1/4 inch. Acceleration isn't there, but he's explosive. 46 explosive runs and finished 2021 with a yards per carry average of 6.2. That's all I got for you guys today. That wraps things up. I appreciate you listening in to the bonus pod where I got to talk your ear off about some more running backs going into this 2022 draft class. And I will catch you guys on the next one.